accurate drawing of me, I guess. I graduated from UW in 2020 with a Bachelor of Arts in Design, and I have joined Game Dev Club as I have confirmed multiple times in 2017, the winter of 2017, and then I became an officer the winter of 2018. Um, During my time as an officer, as some of you might know, that I have organized, I think, every game jam. I don't remember. Um, and I have also helped organize some field trips to Unity office where some of you showed up for your cool games, and a Valve office tour that some of you went to, and it was super cool. Um, and now, after I graduated, I'm working at Tammy Studio at Tencent Games on like a confidential project, hopefully not so confidential soon. And I am working as a narrative and level designer. That is me. I don't really have a lot to talk about other than that, and I hope this helps you understand why I'm here talking to you. Um, let's get started. What is a narrative design? Um, I actually took a vote in Discord and asked what y'all are interested in, and I think this won the popular vote. I just went ahead and did it like 2-3 hours after I started the vote. But seems like all of you are very interested in narrative design. But now I have to um, tell you what is narrative design. Um, so first, I like to get this one thing out of the way: is that narrative design is not story. Narrative design is not a simple task in a job description that applies to only one job title. Um, so basically, narrative design is something that has to be done by every single personnel in the project in pre-production and production. That includes level designers, that includes combat designers, system designers, obviously narrative designers. It also has to be done by artists, um, and audio people and everything like that. Narrative design is not simply a script written by a couple people. So if we get that out of the way, I guess we can get started with something that is really important. I guess all of you might want to know. Why should you care, or why should I care about narrative design in your game? So as I understand it, a lot of people in this club um, have, uh, you know, some goal or two in game design or game development. I know that some of you might want to go into the industry, some of you might want to go indie, and some of you actually just wants to do it for fun. But regardless of how what your end goal is in the game, it never really escapes this kind of a goals product triangle that I consider it. You have a designer goal. You Through the designer goal, you have a product, and while you're designing for the product, you also understand the player's goals. And sometimes the player's goals influences the designer's goal, and then that is a kind of a loop. And if you were to understand that there is a designer goal and there's a player goal and that is different, then you will probably be familiar with the process that goes, okay, first, I want to make a game. And you'll ask yourself, why do I want to make this game? What will my game look like? And how will it be played? And it doesn't really matter why you want to make a game. There's got to be a reason. Um, Whether there is a story you want to tell, a character you want to create, or a world you want to build your game in, or there is an emotional response that you want to echo in your players, or just a really cool game mechanics that you want to program, or a really good game that you want to, not copy, but you want to model your game after. Uh, things like that. There's got to be something you want to do that makes you want to create this product. And this was what I consider a designer goal. And that is something that you want to present to a player, because without an audience, your game would not receive any feedback, or it might not reach the goal that you set out for. And yes, everything I said might be super cool for you as a designer or your team as a whole. There's got to be one point where you want to make sure that someone else cares for what you care for, and someone else also consider your game cool, or what you're sharing is cool. And I'm not saying that these three elements are the only elements in a game. It is just a starting process of, very in the macro level of game design. So this is kind of the game part I'm talking about. There is this guess the game session that I want you to participate in. I will give you a description and a description plus, and you'll tell me what you think the game is. Or I gave you the description, and tell me what the game is after the description give. Okay, it's not Hollow Knight. I'm just gonna. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna start. So, description is: you as a player, you assassinate enemies, you run around the map, and you kill monsters and bosses. What do you think the game is? Alright. Mario Golf. Shadow of Colossus. Dark Soul. Okay. Um, what about this? Description plus. You are shinobi of Imperial Japan, and you, to grant your master's wishes to end immortality, you traverse the lands and fight against monsters in the depths of the world. A Sekio? A Sekio? Yes, it is. It is Sekiro. And thanks for people who said Ring Fit Adventures. Thanks, Chow. Uh, anyway, the next game would be you as a player. You run around, you assassinate enemies, run around the map, kill monsters and bosses. What is the game? Several people are typing. Oh no. Sekiro 2. But assassinate people in Hollow Knight, you only ever just like fight them and press attack button a lot. Okay, I'll give you the description plus. You're a mercenary from ancient Greece. You started a journey to seek your parents and find your home during the turbulent wartime of ancient Greece. What is the game? Okay, it is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Mario Odyssey. Thanks, Jose. So this little game, from this little game, I actually want to make a point where the things I have just shown you in description is what I would call the gameplay part of a game, where the systems, mechanics, and stats to combat, and what is basically what boils down into the skeletons of a game. But if you want to add something special to your game, hence in my little test is the description plus, that will be the narrative part that involves world setting, environment storytelling, a plot, character design, and everything else that you might consider above the bare bones skeleton, the mechanics of a game. So you can see how a narrative design influences the mechanics, even though when you boil down into the skeleton, they might be the same mechanics and systems. Things differ and makes people think that your game is more special than the others. Because narrative design is what makes it stand out and what gives it meaning. And I'm not saying that mechanics and systems and gameplay are not cool, um, or not important, because gameplay is really important. Without gameplay in a game, it's really not a game at all. It's just a probably extended TV show or a movie. Um, but I would like to say that if you want to make a game work, gameplay and narrative should drive each other and they depend on each other. There really is no way to make one thing after the other. They both of them have to be developed simultaneously for it to work. Um, because a lot of earlier games, people tried different ways to design it. People tried to have a very full-fledged gameplay and mechanics and then try to fit in a narrative later, and turns out the narrative doesn't make sense at all and it's just a very, very boring game. And then there are times that people written out an entire script and they thought out the whole story and everything, and then they try to fit the mechanics and systems in there, and turns out it's not a fun game. And then it turns out it's still a boring game because people might as well go watch a movie that's 2 hours long or a TV show. So when you are doing narrative design and making a game, make sure that the two of them actually, fit into each other, and make sure they depend on each other so it's not boring. Um, so a little uh, section conclusion here is I think narrative design makes your game special, because your game should not be simply piled up by mechanics and gameplay, and it should have your own thoughts, your own design, and something that you want to show to your player. And that's why narrative design is special. And after all of these, and you still think that you want to keep listening, I will then move on to some tools and theory that I have prepared. Before I start with my, tools and theories, I would like to point out that in narrative design, there are no rules, there are only tools. There is no perfect formula for a perfect narrative design. You can't follow um, the steps. You have to find the narrative design for your game, and it is different for every game. And, you know, I think that's obvious. And so, let me introduce what I would call the basic structure of narrative design. I have organized it into 3 levels. We have the high level design, the low level design, and something I definitely made up, the even lower level design. The high level design is the theme, the world building, and the setting of a game, which I'll explain later. And low level design will be the plot, the story. There is a difference between the two. There's stakes, the character designs, and the objectives and rewards of the game. And then in the even lower level design, there are story delivery and surprises. Surprises is something I definitely made up, but I think it's important, so I have decided to, you know, put it in their own bullet point. So for starters, high level design is the theme of the game, the setting, and world building. The theme is what you want to say. It's what I mentioned before, where what's the message you want to deliver, what's the emotion you want to evoke, um, and what mechanics you want to show off. That is the thing that revolves around your game. For the theme of the game, um, I do highly recommend, if you have something in mind, just like keep that on a sticky note and put it on your computer or something like that, because every design decision revolves around your theme, because everything that you put in a game should help you, um, everything you put in the game should help you deliver this message. And if some design decision you made does not help you deliver this message, or does not help you build the world or anything like that, that it should not be involved in the game because A, it will send false messages, or B, it will just waste storage, and it doesn't have to be in the game. But I hope that makes sense. And next, it's the setting of the game. How is the world of the game going to present itself? That goes from whether the time period, the country, or the whether it's animals, whether it's people, everything um, about the world representation that goes into setting. And then there's world building that goes a step further from setting, because that goes down to what is the world going to present to the players. It goes all the way from architecture, environments, nature, and then there's characters, NPCs, or props, everything like that goes into world building and how it goes into the world. And that is what I call a high level design. It is a very macro, um, it is a very macro level of how you plan the game, um, if you have a plan at all. Um, but what I'm saying that you should have a plan. And then we move on to the low level design. It goes to the story, the plot, the characters, and the stakes. The story is different from the plot because the story can be something that happens before the game, and it can also be something that happens after the game. It doesn't have to be what you present to the players. This is something that maybe sometimes only the designer knows what is the story of the game. Because in the story, you have a status quo and something changes, and then there's a core conflict and something happens, something like that. And the designer should know clearly what changes in the world and what is the core conflict. That is what makes a good story. And then there's the plot. The plot is basically how the story events are organized and paced to shape the player's experience. What does that mean? That means that whatever happens in the game and how you sequence every event is the plot. It might not be the entire story, but that is just how the player perceives the story. And that is also very important. And then there is characters. The word character here applies to all protagonists, antagonists, and the player. Because remember, I said earlier, player themselves also have a goal. Because sometimes the player never does not want the same thing as the protagonist, and sometimes they might agree with the antagonist. This is something that happens a lot in ARPGs. That people might not agree with what the protagonist wants, and there's a dilemma, there's a segregation between player's goal and the character's goals, and people have a very terrible experience playing the game. This game's Game of the Year, Last of Us 2, is a very good example of it. There is such segregation between the protagonist's goals and the player's goal that the player experience ended up terrible, even though it's a very well made game. So the player's objective is constantly generated through any design. The player actually needs to be constantly reminded of what they need to do and why they're doing it. And that's why the character objectives drives the story. And that's why I say that when you're designing, you have to think about the goals of the protagonist, the antagonist, and the player. Because the player, even though you can't see them or you're not designing them, they're also part of the game. Last but not least, there is the stakes of the game. Basically, is what is at risk if the player, um, if the player character doesn't win. What happens if the bad guys win? What happens if the player just give up? If I don't want to play anymore? The stakes is important because that's what drives the player, and that's what makes them interested. That's what makes them keep playing. In a narrative point of view. Obviously, there are a lot of things that might drive them play the game. For example, in a MOBA game, people play the game because they want to hang out with friends or they want to move in ranks and things like that. And that's what I consider a player objective, um, because that is not there by design, but that is something that goes outside of the game that also drives the player. And that is still a player objective. Um, yeah, and I hope this makes sense. You can ask questions later, I guess. And next, there will be what I call the even lower level design. This is something I will probably not talk about in this talk because this is very, very low level. It goes to the story delivery and script writing, which is what I call surprises. Um, the story delivery is technical in a way that it is how the players or users experience their story features. It goes from the scripted dialogues, performances, the visuals, the art, the audio, haptic choices, and UI interactions, everything like that, that goes in story delivery. And that is something that is very detailed. It has to, um, in industry, I'm not saying that's how everyone should do it. In industry, everything that I just said before, the high level design, the low level design, um, should be decided before anything that goes into story delivery begins to be designed. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I hope that makes sense. So story delivery goes way after the higher level and lower level design. And that really depends from section to section, from game to game, and from actors to actors, from scripts to scripts. Um, that's why I call it the even lower level design. And then there are surprises. Um, I hope that in any game, you should create surprises for the players at all times because uh, you should, you know, make sure that your game is exciting and it's not falling within the expectations of all the players, and you should go beyond and exceed it. It is very hard to do. It's easier to say, but when you're doing it, make sure you follow the rules of the world that you have created. Or else your surprise A wouldn't make sense and B will turn into fear. um, what is going on in your game. So, for example, if um, let's see, if Genshin Impact is having a new expansion and everything about the element combat that they've introduced before has been disregarded. Like they kept it in the game, but they made something that is entirely different. For example, ice can fight. I don't know. I never played Genshin, but I know something basic like water can fight fire, like Pokemon, Legend of Zelda. But if they introduce some mechanics that is completely going opposite of this system, uh, nobody would be happy about it because they wouldn't know what to do, and that doesn't follow the rules of the world they have created. Um, and I wouldn't call that a good design, even though they just want to make extra content to to play it. Yeah. Um, well, and I these are all of the explanations I have for what I consider a basic structure of design. And I would like to make a couple examples of what I mean. I know I've been talking about examples, but I like to just um, tell you what I actually mean in the context of a game. So let's start with a game that I like. I don't know if you all heard about it or know about it. It is actually an indie game, but everyone is expecting Hollow Knight. One day, one day I will make a talk without mentioning Hollow Knight, and that will be my surprise. I'm gonna do it. Swear to God. Today is not the day, but one day I'm going to make a talk. There's no Hollow Knight in it. Um, I like this game. Stop giving me shit. This is a good game. Um, the reason why I like this game is because um, it's an indie game. It is not an industry-made triple A or air quotations triple A game. Uh, it is made by a team of, you know, it's made by a small team of people. So I like to make this game. I talk about it a lot because um, a lot of people I'm talking to, my friends, they think that, oh, industry AAA games need narrative design, and sometimes they don't really care about it in indie game. I was like, no, but what if you look at Hollow Knight? Um, the story of the Hollow Knight is to save the world from basically imploding onto itself due to a weird virus, relatable. Um, while uncovering the truth about your background and what came before you. Um, so so sometimes the stories in Hollow Knight, actually not sometimes, when the game started, a lot of things already happened in the game, and the story is only known by the designer. And the job of the player is to discover what happened before while trying to save the world that is right now, that is present. Um, And that is what I mean by the plot is different from the story, because the the plot was that you entered a once busy and flourishing old town that is now quiet and abandoned. You found out from the first NPC that you met that there are secrets to be uncovered underground and something about your identity that's unclear. So you enter the world beneath, and you gather information about what happened and what's happening while fighting cute little bugs. Um, and you venture through the land. You are tasked to save this world while you're venturing through the land, and you eventually save it by defeating this weird virus. Um, Note, a lot of people in there wear masks, to, not to defeat virus, but they wear masks. So wear masks, everyone. Um, so the plot of this game is what presents itself to the player. You only see what you see, but everything that is happening in the background, happening before, it's something that you might not know or might not discover, or it might be discovered by the community, anything like that. Um, things things that are puzzled together by the community should not be part of your main plot, because the plot is just a straight out what you introduce to the players. Um, and I've said a lot about characters, so I'm gonna talk about the character design in this game. Uh, the main character design in this game is special because in the top left corner, if you haven't played a game before, that is you. That is your main character. This main character is special because this character doesn't have a personality. He never speaks. He just does what the player tells you to do. Um, so it is very easy and for a player's goal, like I mentioned before, to be part of the character's goal, because the character itself is a blank page. It doesn't have a personality. You can easily assume your own personality into the character, and it doesn't have to make choices that you don't want to make because it is you. And that is very smart for a game like this, because you need the player's objective to align in order to, explore the, I want to call it like the not, it's not semi-open world, but it's a kind of a lock and key world that has freedom of exploring. Uh, because without the player's incentive to unlock these with uh, the massive map and everything that is involved in the game, a player might easily lose. Player might easily lose drive and motivation to keep playing because some of the bosses are very hard. Um, so yeah, and then every other characters you've seen on the page here are all NPCs with a purpose. and their own objective. If you're wondering how to make your NPC colorful or how to make your NPC important, just make sure you give them a purpose. A character with a purpose is has a lot of stories behind it. So if you give your character a purpose, the character design and the like how you draw the character and how you shape the backstory of the character can easily be deduced through their objective. Uh, or the other way around, if you already have something in mind. Um, I don't know, it is your process. So these NPCs help you shape the world and at the same time help the player uncover the truth of this world because they'll talk to you, they explain to you uh, what they do and how what's their story and things like that. And that moves on to the stake of the game. Stake of the game is what will happen if you don't succeed in saving this world. Every NPC, they have goals and dreams. They will basically be dead, and you will be a very, very sad night. So this is important because sometimes stakes of the game can be simple as if you don't win, everyone dies. Even then, there is a stake, and people will care about it. So um, that's why I want to talk about Hollow Knight because it is very simple to, separate into the structure. And I have an example after this that you might not see coming. It is a game made by one of our former members. I want to make this game an example because um, some of you might still tell me that Hollow Knight is a very successful game, and it is, and it should be, as it deserves. It's a very good game. And most of you might not have the chance to um, make a game that's like 50 hour or 100 something hours of experience. You might make a really, really small game and people play it in recess. Oh, not recess. We don't have recess anymore. Play it in the game jam, or people play it in the showcase or in HuskyCon and everything like that. And I think those games still need narrative design because it's very important. So allow me to don't. I know they don't have recess anymore. I know it's been a while. I'm sorry. If you play during nap time, you're a true gamer. Um, but yeah, I came up with this last minute, but let me introduce this game called Gym Rummy, and I'm gonna play this video. I hope you can see it. Can you see the video?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, cool. Just watch. I'm gonna talk. So, for those who don't know, Gym Rummy is a very short game made by our beloved ex-president Andrew, who is also here. So Gym Rummy is amazing because it is a very simple mechanic of a card game that is Rummy, played with your Uncle Jim. This is fun. So, what's special about this game is, please correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't have time to ask you. I was asleep. I have time difference, but the rules of this game changes every time you play. Uncle Jim will sneakily just put in rules that didn't exist before, and it will become the rule of the game for the rest of the game. As you can see, the control interaction is super simple, and sometimes Uncle Jim will talk to you, other times he just leaves you alone to play the game. But you can see that there is you, the character, and then there is Uncle, like the air quotations, the antagonist of the game, which is just the opposing characters. this is not played by me anyway. If this does not win at the end, I'm going to entirely blame Kaylin. So I hope you win at the end. But the start of the game basically tells you that, oh, you're a family gathering. Oh, you didn't record the whole thing. That's okay. But you're a family gathering. Your Uncle Jim wants to be the cool uncle and introduce this game, Rummy. This game, Rummy, to you and see if you can like play. I'm gonna replay it because I don't want it to be playing when talking. Okay, cool. So you can see that your uncle introduces himself to you and say, "Oh, the adults left you alone, and I'm here to entertain you because I am the cool or the fun uncle," as they said it here. And this immediately creates a character that you're like, "Oh, a cool uncle! Everybody loves a cool uncle." And then there is the mechanics of Rummy, because the narrative design here is done through the mechanics and lines generated with, that rules that is new every time. So when the AI sticks, or when Uncle Jim sticks with the rule every round, you can immediately see that the game changes. So having the rules change throughout the game reinforces the idea that this is an absolutely rigged and unfair game. This is not a justified, this is not a just game at all. So therefore making the win at the end of the game more rewarding and the loss more frustrating, because you know that this is a rigged game and there's nothing you can do to change it. And that plays into the narrative design of the game that, yes, this is your Uncle Jim and that is the person that he is. When it helps with the building of the character, it also helps building the objective, because when there is no real stakes to it, to the game, like nobody's gonna die if you don't win, but maybe they do. I have no idea. It's not in the game. But the player motivation is generally powered by curiosity and people's undying will to, defeat unfairness and try to make sure that they win in this unbalanced scale of the game. And the feeling of overcoming this unfairness and win against the odds gives the player desire to keep playing. And then that is the player's goal. And coincidentally, the player's goal is the player character's goal because they're the same person. So I think this game is great. Good job, Andrew. Sorry for cueing you without telling you. I thought you knew. But yeah, that is the game that Shine linked in the No Mic Discord. And that is what I wish to say for that. It is a very, very fun game. Anyway, so after I have made an example of, you know, Andrew's game and Hollow Knight and everything, I like to, share some conclusions of the game, of not the game, but the talk. I was so involved in Jim Rummy. But these are some conclusions I want to share with you guys that I hope you take away. But before there are solid conclusions, I think a lot of people might ask me this question: does a game absolutely need narrative design? Um, there is. I mean, the whole talk that I just did basically tell you yes, but there are also times that you don't absolutely need a very in-depth narrative design that I've just shown you. And one very good example would be Minecraft, this little indie game that some people might not know about. Um, in Minecraft, there is no player character, there's no plot, there's no theme to the game, um, and there is a setting, but Okay, a lot of people say that there is narrative design, but I am talking about like basic Minecraft, like the very just bare Minecraft in at the beginning. Minecraft is a very successful game. Um, that basically every game aspires to be is probably one of the most successful games ever, but it doesn't really have a designed narrative, not in the way that I have just described anyway. Um, and I kept asking myself, why is this game so successful if whatever I said before was true or in some way a gathered experience from many industry professionals. Um, so after seeking some answers from many different sources, including asking professors or asking coworkers and everything like that, um, I think I came up with an answer that I think I am satisfied with, which has to do with players' goals and objective in the game. That shows you how important that is because I've mentioned it a million times in the talk already. I would consider Minecraft something called an autotelic game. What does autotelic mean? You ask. I that is when my one and only Latin degree comes in handy. Auto means itself and oneself, and telic comes from the Greek word telos, that means goals and aims. And autotelic means that the aims and the goals are generated within itself, which in this case is the player. In Minecraft, the player's goal is generated as you are playing the game. When you spawn into the world, the game doesn't tell you what to do. The character and the player character doesn't have a goal. The goal is set by the player themselves. And as the game goes on, the player's goal is constantly renewed and constantly, you know, changes that the power, the incentive that the player has within itself is enough to power the player to keep playing the game over and over again because every time you spawn in a new world, a new realm, you can have an entirely different game on its own. And that is sustainable enough for this game to not have any designed plots and stories and narrative and still be extremely successful. And as you can see, the player's goal and the character's objective is incredibly important in a game because if you can have a game that player's goal generates within itself, then this is a very sustainable way for this game to be very successful. And obviously, I'm talking in a commercial sense, because, well, if you have a game that is extremely sustainable within itself, uh, it basically sells itself, and people would just be constantly playing and playing and playing over and over. And if you ask me that does the game absolutely need narrative design, I would still tell you yes and no, because there are a lot of games like Minecraft. That is what I say autotelic. Um, well, after that, I think I have get this one little question out of the way. I have some suggestions that I want to share. First of all, is when you want to start narrative designing your narrative in a game, that writing is rewriting, because you can't. It is impossible to get it right in the first draft. There is no perfect first draft, and I think a good story, a perfect story for a game, comes from editing and rewriting your draft. And it is essential. Everybody does it. Hollywood scriptwriter does it. Writers, novel writers do it, and game writers do it. Writing is rewriting. Don't be afraid to rewrite and re-edit over and over until you think it fits with your theme and what you're trying to say. Second of all, is that there shouldn't be any backstory unless it is parsed over time. It is like what I said in Hollow Knight, that there are many backstories that happen before the game, but the stories are parsed throughout the 50 something hour experience of the game. And sometimes without backstory, the game still runs fine and there is still a plot. You don't expect players to read everything that you write in a game to understand what's going on. So the backstory should can be involved and sometimes it might, juice up the narrative, but it shouldn't be something that is necessary for the players to read. Um, so it should not affect the progression of the game plot. But sometimes if you want to add to it, like, in Skyrim, you have literally books and books of stories for you to read, but it doesn't affect the progression of the game, and it's something that people are like, oh, that's cool, that's nice to have.